Good evening. I'm Armando Cuellar, President of the Weslaco ISD Board of Trustees. This special board meeting is being conducted in compliance with the Texas Open Meetings Act. Notice of this meeting has been posted online for at least 72 hours. The board is meeting by the use of Google Meets and telephone transmission, which allows two-way communication for members of the public during public comments. A recording of this meeting is being made and will be available to the public at a later date. The time now is 4:08, and I call this meeting to order. I'll now begin the roll call. Call each board member by name and signify your presence by saying here or present when called. Mr. Isidro Nieto?
Present.
Mrs. Jackie Sustaita?
Present.
Coach Jesse Trevino?
Present.
Dr. Jaime Rodriguez? Mr. Mark de los Santos?
Present.
And Mr. Andrew Gonzalez. Let the record reflect that we have a quorum of board members in attendance. Item 3, public comments.
There are none.
Item 4, closed meeting to discuss A, personnel matters, Texas Government Code 551.074. 1, discussion regarding superintendent's recommendation on resignations or retirements of certified professional personnel. 2, deliberation regarding the appointment, employment, evaluation, reassignment, duties, discipline, or dismissal of a public officer or employee, Texas Government Code 551.074 and 551.071. A, discussion regarding superintendent's recommendation to rescind the offer of a term contract for a teacher for the 2022-2023 school year. B, discussion regarding superintendent's recommendation for proposal of non-renewal of 2021-2022 teacher term contract. B, consultation with attorney regarding A, pending or contemplated litigation. B, a settlement offer. Or C, a matter in which the duty of the attorney to the Weslaco ISD under the Texas Disciplinary Rules of Professional Conduct of the State Bar of Texas clearly conflicts with Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code 551.071. The time now is 4:10, and we will go into closed session. Let the record reflect that Mr. Andrew Gonzalez has joined the meeting at 8:24.
Yep. 4:13.
I'm sorry.
4:20.
Senior moment. 4:25. Okay. The time now is 4:25, and we have reconvened an open meeting. Section A, possible action if necessary on items discussed in closed meetings. 1, discussion and possible action regarding superintendent's recommendation on resignations and retirements of certified professional personnel. Dr. Coronel?
Board President and members of the board, I ask that you accept my recommendation on resignations and retirements for certified personnel as discussed in closed session.
Motion to approve.
Have a motion by Mr. De Los Santos to approve,
Second.
second by Mr. Nieto. The second to a vote, signify your approval by saying aye when I call your name. Mr. Nieto?
Aye.
Mrs. Slater?
Aye.
Coach Trevino?
Aye.
Mr. De Los Santos?
Aye.
And Mr. Gonzalez?
Aye.
Motion carries. Number 2, discussion and possible action regarding superintendent's recommendation to rescind the offer of a term contract for a teacher for the 2022-2023 school year. Dr. Coronel?
Board President and members of the board, I ask that you accept my recommendation to rescind the term contract for the teacher in question as discussed in closed session for 2022-2023 school year.
Moves to propose the non-renewal of a teacher's 2021-2022 term contract and authorize the superintendent to provide the teacher with all the required legal notices.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Dos Santos.
Was that the second part, or is that the one to rescind?
For both?
I want to rescind.
Okay, second.
We have second by Mr. Nieto. Take it to a vote. Signify your approval by saying aye when I call your name. Mr. Nieto?
Aye.
Mr. Slater?
Aye.
Coach Trevino?
Aye.
Mr. Dos Santos?
Aye.
And Mr. Gonzalez?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Item 3, Discussion and possible action regarding superintendent's recommendation for proposal of non-renewal of the 2021-2022 teacher term contract. Dr. Coronel?
Board President, members of the board, please accept my recommendation for the non-renewal of the teacher term contract.
Move to propose the non-renewal of a teacher's 2021-2022 term contract and authorize the superintendent to provide the teacher with all required legal notices.
Second.
Okay, motion by Mr. Los Santos and a second by Mr. Nieto. Take it to a vote. Signify your approval, saying aye when I call your name, or no if you don't approve. Okay, Mr. Nieto?
Aye.
Mrs. Slater?
Aye.
Costeño?
Aye.
Mr. Los Santos?
Aye.
And Mr. Gonzalez?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Item 6, adjournment.
So moved.
We have a motion to adjourn, and the time now is 4:28. We now will go into our workshop, okay? Good afternoon. I'm Armando Cuellar, President of the Weslaco ISD Board of Trustees. This board workshop is being conducted in compliance with the Texas Open Meetings Act. Notice of this meeting has been posted online for at least 72 hours. The board is meeting by the use of Google Meets and telephone transmission, which allows two-way communication for members of the public during public comments. A recording of this meeting is being made and will be available to the public at a later date. The time now is 4:29, and I call this workshop to order. I will now begin the roll call for each board member. Signify your presence by saying aye or present when I call your name. Mr. Isidro Nieto.
Present.
Mrs. Jackie Sustaita.
Present.
Coach Jesse Trevino.
Present.
Mr. Marcelo Santos.
Present.
Mr. Andrew Gonzalez.
Present.
And Mr. Jaime Rodriguez is not present. Let the record reflect that we have a quorum, although it's not necessary for a workshop. And that takes us to item 3, public comments.
There are none.
We have none. Item 4, presentation and discussion on TASB staffing and salary study report. Dr. Coronel.
Board President and members of the board, I'd like to introduce Ms. Cheryl Hoover and Aaron Kalecki from TASB. I hope I didn't butcher those names too bad. And so I think we'll first go with the staffing review. Okay?
Yes, thank you for having us. We appreciate you and have enjoyed working with your district, particularly Dora and Daniel, and the principals and all the leaders in the district in gathering data. So again, I'm Cheryl Hoover. I'm a TASB HR consultant, so thrilled to be with you today. So I believe you have the report as well as a copy of the PowerPoint, and just to kind of warn you, it's very cumbersome in both reports. There's a lot of information, a lot of data, a lot of charts, et cetera. So basically, I will summarize the staffing review. So basically, our process, is my sound okay? Basically, our process on a TASB staffing review is we collect data. So we collect student data. So all the data was collected in March from the principals at each campus. So we had up-to-date student data. And then the staff data was collected from HR as well as from each department and each campus and the auxiliary services. So the review was over the entire district. It reviewed central office staff, and it reviewed campus staff and auxiliary staff. So site visits, we did those, actually did not do site visits. We did interviews virtually through Teams and talked with each principal and each director, et cetera. And the reason that we do that is we have the data and we have the number of employees, but there's always discussion on who does what and just the roles and descriptions and those things. So, and then also we feel like it's important that the principals and the auxiliary supervisors and district leaders have some input on what's important to them with staffing in the review. So they do have input in that. We do a peer comparison, and you'll see the districts that we chose to compare your district with. And those districts are about the same size as your district and about the same student type as far as economically disadvantaged. So you'll see those peer districts here in a moment. And so the whole report, and what is interesting about the report is, I'm an outside source, and I am a former ISD teacher, principal, HR director, curriculum director. So I've been at a district where, every name and every position, those people. So here I'm able to unemotionally look at numbers. So basically it's a numbers report, a staffing report, and we compare you to the state average. We compare you to your district peers that we selected that look like your district. And then we have standards at TASB that over the 30 years of doing staffing reviews, we've created benchmarks for all positions, or most positions. And then we also use professional organizations like the Texas Counseling Association or the APPA, which is the Association of Physical Plant Administrators, have staffing benchmarks and recommendations for maintenance, custodial, grounds, and meals per labor hour for child nutrition. So in the report, you will see some comparisons with PEEMS, because all the districts, of course, have to report their FTEs through PEEMS to TEA, so we have access to that data. We also do a TASB HR salary survey each year in the fall, and your district does participate in that, and that gives the number of FTEs, those full-time equivalents that you have in all positions that we ask for, and we don't ask for every single position. We're going to have to match titles up. For example, in some districts you might have a director of HR, others you have an assistant superintendent of HR or chief HR. So there's lots of titles, but we match those up as close as we can. So we compare those. So we have the HR salary survey data we compare to, taper data, and then the benchmark data. So you'll see a lot of different comparisons in the report. So that's the benchmark comparisons. It's comparing you to other districts and to the state and to professional organizations and to best practices. And we look at how you align with those benchmarks and we address the needs. So probably one of the most important things I'll say is, again, this is a numbers report, and only the district leaders know, what is best for your district based on your unique student needs. Every district is different. Every district is unique. I mean, obviously, everyone has the goal to provide efficient staffing and provide instructional programs that are going to best serve their students so they can be successful. So everybody kind of shares that goal in the state of Texas, but you have unique needs. So all of the recommendations in the report are recommendations. They're not any mandates at all. There are recommendations, and some districts will be able to implement, a certain percentage of those recommendations. Some will choose not to. Like I said, we give lots of benchmarks. I did, and your district does have benchmarks already. They do have some benchmarks, and they were looking at those to refine those to be more efficient with staffing. And as you probably know, in the state of Texas, most districts spend about 80% of their budget on personnel and staffing. So if you want to be more efficient, you might have to move staff around, or maybe absorb staff, or maybe add staff in other areas. So any of those things can happen. So anyway, addressing your needs. But again, these are all recommendations based on benchmarking, which is really comparing you to other benchmarks, whether it's peer district, whether it's state average, or whether it's HR salary, or it's best practices, or it's professional organizations. And again, it's all recommendations. The nice thing about doing a staffing review is you really get to step back and look at your staffing. As I've experienced, staffing just kind of happens through the years. And so it's always good to step back and say, where do we staff? Where is our money going? Because again, 80 to 85% of your budget is for personnel. And if we want to make some changes, but we got to know where we are. So it's a good status check on where you are with staffing. So I'm going to go over the summary findings and options here in a moment. These are the peer districts that we used. Abilene, Beaumont, Bryan, Crowley, Harlingen, Mission, New Caney, Rockwell, Church, Cibolo, University City, Tomball, Tyler, and Wiley. In a staffing review, we don't necessarily pick districts right by you in proximity. When Erin speaks with a compensation, she did. She'll pick the districts around you because staff can very easily leave and go to neighboring districts. Here, we're looking at staffing efficiencies. So we pick districts that were about your size, around that 16,000, and around the other percentages and special programs that matched you, obviously. There's a couple in there that maybe be a little lower economic disadvantage, but with your number of students, there's only so many districts in the state of Texas that match yours. So it gives a nice group of peer districts. So those are the peer districts. Historical data, that page, we really like to use this information because we don't just look at totals. So when you look at total student enrollment, we look back the last 5 years at your district, and you can see the last 5 years, you've actually lost students at about 1% per year. So you want to look at staffing and see what you're doing with staffing. If you're losing about 1% of a decline in student enrollment, then you probably wouldn't want to see staffing increase because obviously that's your resource or your source of funding is your number of students. So you'll see that you had a negative 4.8% reduction or decline in student enrollment over those 5 periods. And then below that, you'll look at total teaching staff. And there's 2 really important things to note is that first row on total teaching staff are the total number of teachers. But the second row is teachers per 1,000 students. And that's really a nice thing to look at in digging a little deeper in that you did reduce your teaching staff, but when you compare it to the reduction of students, you actually increased 0.2% per 1,000 students. So when you put your numbers up to 1,000 students, or smaller districts will say 100, but for y'all we'll use 1,000, then you're really comparing your staffing to your student numbers. And so that gives you a really good picture. So we did that with each one of these on total support, campus administrator, central administration, aides, auxiliary staff, and then total personnel. So if you drop down to that very last 2 rows on total personnel, the district did reduce total personnel by 4.2%. But again, when you rate it to 1,000 per 1,000 students 5 years ago to now, they actually increased 0.7%. So you can see that there has been effort to do that and keep up with that. So that should be commended on. Already, I hear some of the changes that they've made to be more efficient and to use those funds while still serving students. All righty, so this is a chart that you'll see in the report, and this is just the previous information in your chart. And again, comparing, the blue is your district, and it's the number per 1,000 students. So it's not just a number, it's per 1,000 students. So as teachers, you can see overall, teachers, you're below the state average and the peer district average in the number of teachers that you are employing right now. Professional support, you're kind of right in there. Campus administration a little below, central a little below, educational aides, and then you'll see auxiliary staff. You'll see that's much higher than the peer district and state average, and then total personnel is a little slightly below. So again, you're going to see us comparing you in all different ways, to PEAM, state averages, to TAPER, to peer benchmarks, and to professional organizations. So keep that in mind, because you might see some charts that conflict with other charts. You're like, well, I thought we were low here, but now we're high here. But remember, there's different benchmarks that we're using. All righty? So we'll start with the central office departments. Curriculum and instruction is up first, and your district shows 46 FTEs in the department compared to 51.1 for the average of the peer districts. And understand that federal programs, Title I, bilingual, migrant, all of those, even the special ed director, not the staff, but the special ed director, go under C&I. That's all academic, so that includes that number. The second bullet says when adjusted based on enrollment, the district is staffed below the average of the peer districts at 2.8 positions per 1,000 students compared to 3.1, so it's not greatly below, but it's a little bit. And then the last one, just through interviews and talking with Dora Daniel and the curriculum folks, it seems like the department could benefit from a more refined organizational chart instead of separate silos, and as well as defined roles and responsibilities for each job title. Okay, so no recommendation there to reduce, but to just refine the organizational chart. All right, business and finance. Weslaco ISD Business and Finance Department showed 20 FTEs compared to 14 for the average of the peer districts. And when just based on enrollment, that's 1.2 positions per 1,000 students compared to 0.8 positions per 1,000 students. So there might be an opportunity there to absorb maybe maybe in the clerical clerk. We noted that clerk was a little higher there, the number of clerks that they had. But again, there aren't specific benchmarks for central office departments. So basically we compare them to peer districts. So everyone is a little bit unique, but there might be some opportunities there for absorptions. And when we say absorptions, we would always say through attrition. No one should lose their job. But with the school year and the school, you have a beginning, you have an end, and you have new hires and you have resignations. So we would recommend that if you do reduce or absorb in any area, that you would do that through attrition, of course. All right, human resources shows 7 FTEs compared to 7.5 for the average. Based on enrollment, the district staff 0.4 position per 1,000 students, which is exactly what the peer districts had. And we also compared just the state number, and that's exactly the same number. What's a little different about your department is you don't have an assistant superintendent of HR or a chief of HR, but you have your 2 directors. And so no recommendation is being made for the HR department. Operations, we show 11 FTEs. Those are all your supervisors, directors, managers of the auxiliary. And again, that average of the peer districts is 0.7, and that you're staffed equal to that. And when we review data from the 21-22 TASB HR services salary, districts your size will have about 0.6, so just a little below what your district has. Communications, you show 4 FTEs, but you also have your television production communications department, which is quite large. So it's something that makes your district unique. You choose to do that, and there's lots of reasons you choose to do that. So that's separate from this. I did note that in the verbiage underneath the chart when you see the report, but I didn't include all those because they didn't match the titles that we had in our HR salaries. So that's not typical for those positions. But additionally, the department employs a producer, 3 production specialists, 2 technicians, a secretary and office clerk. So there's no recommendation being made there either. All right, we'll move on to the campus. If y'all have any questions as we go on, please ask. I do not mind that at all. So obviously every campus will have a principal, so we don't mention principals because you're going to have your superintendent, you're going to have your principals, but assistant principals, the benchmark that we use at TASB, and this is our benchmark, is 1 assistant principal to every 450 students, and that's at elementary, middle school, junior high, and high school. So looking at your numbers, a little high at the secondary. The current average, again, remember we said 1 to 450. At your secondary level, you have 1 assistant principal to every 329 students. So that's an area that might have the opportunity to consider absorption of 5 secondary assistant principals through attrition. Elementaries, we're right on. Counselors, our recommendation is 1 counselor to every 350 students. We used to use 450, but we have reduced that down or lowered that the last couple of years because of all the mental and emotional needs of students. We know there's greater need. So we use a 1 to 350 at elementary, middle school, and high school. You're right on there. You do have extra support through social workers and through other supports, but we just look at the school counselors. Instructional coaches, your district employs 1 instructional technology coach at each campus. I think they began as a technology coach but has transformed into an academic instructional coach. We do really recommend, and if a district can afford to employ instructional coaches, through a lot of research, we have seen that instructional coaches make a huge impact on teachers through retention, through helping them with their instructional practices, with discipline, with all the things that they have to deal with. So there's really a great impact on instruction. So you have one per campus. No matter what the student enrollment or the teacher numbers are. So you may have one at a high school serving, I don't have the number right in front of me, but 160 teachers, while one might be at elementary serving 30. So it's not quite equitable, but there's a lot of other curriculum and instructional supports at secondary, and really for the whole district through curriculum instruction with your strategists, your instructional coordinators, your federal programs, your migrant program, your bilingual program, your ESL program, your GT program, your special ed program. So there are other supports that do happen and are happening with the teachers. Library staff, you're well employed, well staffed in the library area. I did put an alternate library staffing model in the packet. That is just one of many. Basically, though, it reduces some of the aides in there. Like you may have a librarian and 2 library aides, or you may have a librarian and 3 library aides. So the model would redirect where it's more equitable, where each campus has a librarian and 1 librarian, unless it's a larger campus like the high schools, and just provide some equity. So that's another nice thing about this report. You could look at the equity between the elementary schools amongst themselves, as well as the middle schools and the high schools. So you're staffed above the peer district average at 41 library positions. That includes librarians and aides, compared to 21.7 of your peer districts. So you see you're a little higher there. Clinic staff. The benchmark is 1 to 750 students per clinic staff. Your ratio is 1 to 362. So you do pretty much employ a RN and an LVN and a clinic aide at almost every campus. So that might be an opportunity to do some reductions with at least clinic aides, or having an RN or an LVN at campuses, but not both. Your average is, or your number is 34 compared to the peer district, you're staffed above the peer district average at 34 clinic staff positions compared to 27 to your peer districts. All right, clerical staff.
Question here, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I have a question. The ESSER funds that we got, that includes, we hired a couple of extra clinical aides, I believe, or nurse aides?
Medical assistants.
Medical assistants, is that included in this number? Or, because that's just a temporary,
Yes.
right, with ESSER funds?
That's correct.
Okay.
Good
I was just
question.
making sure that it wasn't like a permanent ratio that we had. Okay.
And good question. In our staffing review, we do not consider funding. We just look at all the staff.
Right.
So those are things, again, that are unique to your district and, of course, to all districts these for these next couple of years, but something to consider.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, clerical staff, and this is your campus clerical staff. The benchmark is 5.5 campus clerical staff per 1,000 students at secondary, and 4.5 staff per 1,000 students at elementary. So based just on those numbers, 5 positions could be redirected and 5 positions added to the secondary campuses. I'm going to tell you, I don't see that very often, that we could actually add. They're under the benchmark. But 7 positions could be absorbed at the elementary campuses based on that benchmark, and that's a TASB benchmark. That's not comparing to peer districts. Non-campus support staff, these are all your clerical that are not at campuses. So this includes, special ed, curriculum, clerks in the business, HR, auxiliary, all of those. So the benchmark is 3 non-campus support staff per 1,000 students. Your district employs 76 in these positions, and the benchmark is 46. So you can see that's quite a bit over that benchmark. So an opportunity to absorb up to 30 of those non-campus support positions. And that is difficult to do. Thank you. but a thorough analysis of duties and responsibilities of each department or office will help identify those. And again, doing that by attrition, of course. Instructional aids, consider the adoption of the alternate educational aid model. The benchmark is 14.8 instructional aids per 1,000 students for general and special ed put together. Your district employs 237 FTEs, instructional aids. So that would mean an absorption of 20 educational aids, and it actually was 12, but when we get to special ed, you see my recommendation is to add 8 special ed aids, and this chart right here talks about all special ed and general ed together. So if I recommend to add 8 over here, that 8 has to be added to reduce general ed over here because you're already over according to the benchmark. Okay, that's where that number comes. And again, that chart, that is just one alternate model. I could come up with 50. It's where those aids are on your campuses. They could be in different places. It's just one opportunity to look at maybe what could be moved around.
Another comment here. Didn't we also temporarily add instructional aids for the next 2-3 years? So this is also affecting these numbers?
Yes.
Okay, so these aren't like permanent numbers either. If we looked at this 2-3 years ago, they would have been different.
So we had paid for, we've allocated 2 years of ESSER funding.
For the instructional aids.
For the instructional aids.
And they're included in these numbers, which makes
That's
it look
correct.
like we have, okay.
Through a grant.
Good questions. So in special ed staffing, we do have benchmarks that we use, and they're kind of at the bottom of the page. Resource inclusion, CMC, not hardly anybody does CM anymore. We recommend 1 staff to every 15 students, middle school 1 to 12 in those programs, and elementary 1 to 9. So that's resource inclusion. Our benchmark we use for life skills, autism, behavior, early childhood is 1 staff to 4 students. But if you have a self-contained program, we would always recommend a teacher and an aide. So even if you had a campus that just had 3 students that were assigned to the Life Skills Autism program, if it's self-contained, we would recommend 2 staff people, 1 teacher and 1 aide. So based on those benchmarks, we would recommend that you could absorb 4 special ed teachers, but add 8 special ed aides. And there's different ways to do that too. In the chart, you can see some examples, but it's not, the recommendations aren't just that would be how you do it. There are other ways to do that as an example. The state average is 1 special ed teacher for every 15 special ed students, and your average is 1 to 14.2. So not too far off there. All right, special ed assessment staff, this is an area that you were really low in. Assessment staff are your DIAGs and your LSSPs. You would probably hire them if you could. You probably can't find them. But, so you're probably, using some contract services and you're low. So the benchmark caseload that we say for each assessment staff is 1 to 80 to 85 students. Your caseload right now for this staff in your district is 1 to 107 students. So you can see they're working really hard. So we would say you need to add 4 assessment staff, whether they be LSSPs or they be diagnosticians. And then consider addition of 5 speech therapy staff. The benchmark is 1 to every 45 to 50 students. Your staff right now has a caseload of 69.5 per speech language pathologist or assistant. So a need to add there. And I know that's easier said than done.
Question on special ed. What about occupational therapy? I know that we had added in-house.
We did not address the OT, PT, VI because that's very specific to your number of students.
Okay.
So, and it's usually a pretty small number anyway.
Okay.
But great question. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, let's talk about teachers. Elementary, obviously we used a 1 to 22 ratio, so that's strictly what this is about. The benchmark or the average for students per teacher in the state is 19 to 20.5. Your current ratio is 20, so you're pretty close to that. If you absorbed up to 27 elementary teachers, you could increase that ratio to almost 21. And so you'll see the chart for each campus, and then you'll see the total. What may affect this for you next year is if you have a change in the way that you implement your bilingual program. So you may, not be able to absorb that many, depending on what kind of program you go to. One thing I found interesting was your district staff's PE teachers and all PE teachers and not PE aides. So I put an example in there of possibly staffing a PE teacher, then adding an aide, or if you get larger, 2 PE teachers and 2 aides, or, instead of just going all teachers. So there is an example there. Middle school. Again, this number just happened to be the same. Consider absorption of 27 middle school teachers. That's at all 4 of the middle school campuses. We recommend an average of 20 to 24 students per class. Your 4 middle schools average 21.4, which is fairly close, not too bad. I see sometimes 16, 17 in there, so not too far away. But if you absorb those 27 middle school teachers, you could get an average of up to 23 students. Or you could even go higher. If you absorb 35, you could go up to 24, the high end of that benchmark. But every staffing at middle school and high school is all related and dependent upon your master schedules. So your master schedules at middle schools and high schools will drive staffing, which drive your budget. So it's a matter of really seeing who creates those schedules, why they're created that way, et cetera. So maybe some more efficiency in master schedules. I will say, though, looking at the middle school, just those 4 middle schools, I always look at really do an analysis of the master schedule and look for open spots. Like maybe a teacher, they have an 11-period schedule, so teachers teach 10 out of 11. But I'm looking to see if there's some teachers that maybe just teach 7 or 8 or 9. There were none. They're all teaching 10 out of 11. So as far as the equity on the campus and across that level, they were very efficient in everybody teaching that. And I know also at the middle schools, they do not have an athletic period. So if that's going to be put in, that's going to change the staffing also. Okay. And we typically do see athletic periods at middle schools. I was surprised when I saw that. I don't see that very often. High school teachers, again, your high school staffing is going to be based on your master schedule. I think at the 2 traditional high schools, Weslaco High School and Weslaco East High School, they have done a really good job of trying to have a consistent master schedule and using staff efficiently. So really the combined absorption of those were 4.5 high schools teachers through attrition. So they're averaging about 23.5 students per class when we would recommend 22 to 25. So they're pretty close in there. So now if you wanted to go all the way up to the high end of the benchmark at 25, probably could reduce about 15 more teachers. But again, that's based on the master schedule and looking at efficiencies there. Athletic periods. So there's not athletic periods at middle school, so we'll just talk about high school. So what we look at the high school, we are in Texas. We never say reduce coaches. We don't even look at that. All we look at is during the school day, during the athletic period, how many coaches, FTEs, do you have in that period with students, and what's the athlete-coach ratio compared to the teacher-student ratio? And they ought to be fairly close. Okay, well, you can imagine they're probably not, but that's the goal. So if you look at that, the current student-athlete-coach ratio is 1 to 14.5, so 1 to 15 athletes. While if you remember middle school and high school, you're 1 to 21 or 23. So trying to increase that only during the athletic period. So, and I'm a former coach, so I can vouch for that. If I'm coaching basketball, do I really need all 4 of my coaches? During that athletic period, I might be doing the mass drills or whatever, and then I really work on specialty stuff out of school. So they're still coaching, they just might not be coaching during the athletic period. And then also looking at let's see if I have that here. Nope, I didn't have that. Looking to see at what they teach and what their certifications are. I think it was a pretty good mix. If you see coaches and they're all certified in social studies or PE, you don't have a lot of variance in what they can teach, and flexibility, you want that. But you had a pretty good selection of special ed, math, different ones in there. So, and what that allows the scheduler to do or the principals to do, if you needed to add an algebra class, because of the numbers at the start of the year, and you had a coach that could teach algebra, then you may not have to hire another teacher. You could just maybe have that period there. So that's what that's about. Okay, let's go on to auxiliary. Maintenance and ground staff. If you remember at the beginning of the report, that was one area. Auxiliary was much higher than the state average and your peer district average, and this is where you're going to see this. Maintenance and grounds, we use the APPA standard, which is the Association of Physical Plant Administrators standards. And for maintenance workers, and this is all the skilled workers, general workers, everything, their ratio is 1 maintenance worker to 67,500 gross square feet. So I did get that footage. And groundskeeper is 1 groundskeeper to every 35 acres. So you'll see the numbers in there. You currently staff 1 maintenance worker to 38,043 gross square feet as opposed to that 67,000. You see that's a big difference. And then groundskeeper 1 to every 23 acres instead of the 35. You'll see total maintenance and grounds department is staffed at 100 FTEs while your peer district average staff at 45. So there's a pretty big difference there. So you could consider through absorption up to 25 maintenance workers and up to 8 groundskeepers. Custodial staff, pretty right on. APPA standards there is 1 custodian for every 21,000 cleanable square feet. There are variables. Every building's different. How old, how new, what's your equipment, what are the hours they work. Obviously, they can clean more when students aren't there. There's a lot of variables there. But really, y'all were right on. I just said consider the addition of 2 custodial positions to lower that CSF. So right now, each custodian is cleaning about 25,700 square feet, which is a little bit over that. All right, child nutrition. We use meals per labor hour, so if you have 5 cafeteria workers at a campus and they all work 7 hours, 5 times 7 is 35, that would be the labor hours for that campus. And then I obtained the numbers for breakfast, lunch, snacks, suppers, all that. We put that in our formula, and you come out with an efficiency rating. You want to be over 70%. 2 secondary campuses and 2 elementary campuses were the only ones not over that 70%. And the way to increase that percentage of efficiency is to increase participation of students eating or decrease your staff. So only working on the staff side, that would be an absorption of 10 cafeteria workers, which is 65 labor hours. All right, transportation. We really don't compare transportation with other districts because you're all different sizes, you have different number of students that ride, different routes, all those things. But we did put a section in there. The peer districts report an average of 112.5 transportation staff. You have 77. A lot of vacancies there also. And then when adjusted for student enrollment, you staff 4.7 compared to 6.8, and that's probably not by choice. You're probably having a tough time hiring those folks. Technology, same thing. We do compare to peer districts, though. Peer districts report an average of 24.7 technology staff, and you have 26, so just slightly above. And when you compare that to student enrollment, you're about 1.6 per 1,000 students compared to the 1.5. And of course, technology, it used to be difficult to compare districts in technology, but everybody has gone to one-to-one from COVID, so now it's a little bit easier to compare because everybody's implementing one-to-one and continuing that. So kind of have a more equal playing field there. Security, this is very specific to your district, your location, the needs of your district. So peer districts report an average of 24 security positions. Your staff significantly above that at 56. But when adjusted for student enrollment, you have 3.4 per 1,000 compared to 1.5. But you do have a large number of security guards, if I remember correctly. So it's a little different than the peace officers. So I would just say a more thorough analysis of the security department is recommended to determine appropriate staffing and what your needs are for your district. And looking ahead, what does all this mean? Again, these are strictly recommendations. These are strictly numbers. It's a numbers report. If you do any reductions, I know that y'all are making changes already, but doing that by attrition because this is the time of the year to do that. Evaluate those master schedules. That's something that your district staff will want to do, and they probably are doing already. And then gradual implementation. There's no district that can take these and turn all of that around. That would be unreasonable. And then your district has a staffing plan, but looking at maybe a little more detailed staffing plan at central office areas and auxiliary areas, as well as the campus areas. And there is a cost page on there. If you implemented every one of those, it would tell you what you could save. Again, that would be unrealistic to be able to implement all those, but there are opportunities to save some funds or to move funds around. And just want you, board members and Dr. Coordinator to know you do get 1 hour from TASB for continuing education credit for listening to me. And you will get 1 hour from Aaron too. So you're getting 2 hours of board training tonight for your attention. So we'll just get that roster signed and returned back. And you will get certificates. Those are for you to keep. And any questions?
Like always, I have a little question.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm just thinking, because I'm thinking fine arts,
Yeah.
I'm very into,
Yeah.
it falls under regular, like the way athletic periods, and we have
Yeah.
our athletic periods, and we looked
Yeah.
into that. Fine arts would fall under,
Just your other classes.
Regular.
Yeah, regular classes, yeah. We
Okay.
didn't break those out, yeah.
yeah, I know it's very different
Yeah.
by district, of
Yeah.
course. I would just like to know how other districts around us
Yeah.
are staffing compared to their
Yeah.
numbers. That's something I'm very interested in
Yeah.
finding out. But
Yeah.
we can
And
do
it is
that.
a good question because
It
it's
is a
good,
good
it's good to, for those that watch the video and they see and hear these numbers as far as elementary, middle school, and high school, and they, and you're saying, I know that I know the district already has a plan, and it's expecting growth
Yeah.
going into next year. But when they hear teachers, it means overall everyone, and that includes, like Ms. Ustaite was saying, fine arts, sports, et cetera.
Athletics,
It's
PE,
embedded all into one.
Technology.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Because sometimes people just
Yeah.
separate that from core.
Right.
Only
Yeah.
instruction.
Special
core
ed is not
instruction.
included in that teacher count. Special ed is totally pulled out.
Right.
Okay.
So the special ed numbers are separate. Yes.
Got it.
Alrighty.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is the sound okay? So thank you for having both of us out to this afternoon, this evening, and thank you all for your service to the students of Weslaco ISD. So I'm going to kick things off. This is going to look a little bit familiar to what you just saw with Cheryl's presentation, but we always want to start with our pay study process so you have a good feel of what we accomplished together. So we began, much like Cheryl said, with data collection. So we worked with your district to collect pay data, personnel information. During that time, I also had a kickoff discussion with Dan, Dora, Lisa, and Megan. We talked through concerns that they had with the current compensation plan and planned the project going forward. This was a very collaborative project. It's important to me that the recommendations that I make are going to work for you in Weslaco ISD. So we had to make sure that we were getting really good information and data up front. And then from there, we conducted a market pay review. So we gathered market data, and then we matched common jobs in Weslaco ISD to jobs in other districts and even outside of school districts in some cases. And then we built models for improvement. So we made adjustments to your pay structures. We simplified them in a lot of ways. We made sure that they're competitive with the market. And then we also provided some guidance for adjusting employee pay when needed. So let's talk a little bit about pay system objectives. So first, a pay system is designed to recruit quality employees. And that can be done through competitive entry rates and also competitive pay for experienced new hires. Second is paying for the job value. So this goes back to the market match I was talking about and the use of pay ranges. So the pay ranges are preventing you from overpaying for a job or underpaying for a job. You want to pay for the value of that job. And then another objective is, of course, to retain the quality staff that you currently have. And one way to do that is through general pay increases. This advances employees that are below the market towards the market rate faster. And then last, of course, is controlling cost. As board members, you have the responsibility of adopting the budget, and of course, the salary plan and any increases should be driven by that budget. So this is a sample of what a market-based pay system looks like. There are different pay grades, and they provide a career path for your employees. So pay ranges have control points. We have, of course, the minimum rates. That's the starting rate that you would pay someone that is pretty new to a job. Then we have the midpoint rates, as are, of course, in the middle of these pay ranges. Those are typically, we want to see them aligned with the market rate for the group of jobs in those pay grades. And then, of course, the maximum rate is the maximum rate that you're willing to pay for any one of the jobs within those pay grades. So let's talk about market pay strategy. So typically, what we want is to pay employees at the market rate for the job. That's the target rate, it's the value for the job. But we do set range parameters to allow some variance. There will be times that it makes sense to pay people below the market rate. That would be someone that's very new to a job and gaining proficiency. And then conversely, there are also times that you might want to pay someone above the market rate, and that could be based on someone who's very experienced, brings special skills that you really need in your district, or just a job that's very hard to fill. So let's dig into your pay study, and I'll start with the list of your market districts. So when I talk about the market today, this is the list of districts that I'm talking about. As Cheryl mentioned, with pay and compensation studies, we want to look locally largely because your employees can go to these districts for jobs and vice versa in many cases. And one thing to point out about this chart, so you'll see that not all of the X's go all the way across. For the very largest districts, we did remove the data for director level and above. We do that purposefully because it's not really a fair comparison when districts get so much bigger in size. And then also, the districts participated in our TASB salary survey and our TASB stipend survey in differing rates, and so obviously if they didn't participate, then we couldn't include that data. And then I also want to point out that we used a couple of other market sources. So we do use non-school data for any positions that also exist outside of education. So that would be jobs like your maintenance jobs, your nurses, accounting jobs, certainly all of your technology jobs. We want to make sure that those jobs are being compared against similar jobs in school districts near here, but also private employers. Okay, so this is a snapshot of the demographics of your teachers. Weslaco ISD has a variety of experience levels among the teaching staff. Your average teacher experience is 17 years. The state average is 12 years, by the way, so that's very strong. That's an experienced teaching staff. And the majority, 55% of the teaching staff, has 16 or more years of experience. We also want to look at the demographics of your newly hired teachers. So these, you hired 59 new teachers for the school year this year. That's just 6% of your teaching staff. And I do want to pause here because this is honestly an extraordinarily low turnover number. I do these pay studies for districts across the state. This is my 4th year. I don't think I've ever seen a number this low. So congratulations, you are retaining teacher staff, and that's wonderful. And the experience of your newly hired teachers is also well distributed, so that tells me that you are successfully recruiting at all levels for teachers. So congrats. Okay, this graph shows you a visual of how your teacher salaries compare to the market median. So on this graph, Weslaco ISD is the orange line and the blue line represents the market median for teacher salaries. And as you can see from this graph, your teacher salaries are above the market median at all surveyed years. And then the next chart shows you the numbers behind that graph that we just looked at. So a quick explanation, we survey for teacher salaries in 5-year increments, and that's how the market analysis is broken down. So the top row shows you your current salary at each of the surveyed years, and then the following rows show you the local market median, your percentage difference from the market, and then finally the dollar amount difference from the market. So again, big picture, your teacher salaries are above market at all surveyed years. And notably, Weslaco ISD has the highest average teacher salary of all your peer districts. And that's due to competitive teacher pay practices and retention of experienced staff. I also haven't seen that before. You were number one. So we also took a look at teaching area stipends. So these are, we're going to talk about extracurricular stipends later in the report, but these are stipends that are paid for teaching assignments, not extra duties. So the chart's broken down by the various stipends that we survey for, the market median, and your stipend. And then the last column shows you the number of districts that reported that they pay that stipend. So again, big picture here, your teaching area stipends are competitive. And next, we're going to look at the market comparisons for your non-teaching staff. So I've broken these into two groups. We'll start with your exempt staff, and then we'll look at your non-exempt staff next. But then I also further broke down each of these groups. So we'll start with the education administrative or administration staff. So this is all of your instructional directors and above, assistant soups, all of those types. So on average, this group is paid even with the market median. And then the next column, so we also look at your structures. So the first one is your employee pay, and the next one is your structures where your midpoints are set. And your structures are 2% above the market, which is really where you want them. You want to shoot a little bit above the market with your structures. And then the final column tells you the number of benchmarks we were able to match up. So it was 12 jobs for that education administration group. Campus administration, of course, those are your principals and your assistant principals. Overall, that group is paid 5% above market, with the structures set really quite competitively at 14% above. And then your educational professionals, those are jobs like your counselors, your instructional coaches, coordinators. It includes your OTs, your PTs, your speech language pathologists. So they're paid 6% above market. And then the last two are your business type professionals. So business admin would be your business director levels and above. And then your business professionals are jobs like accountants, and also a lot of your programmers and technology jobs fall in that group. And the next group is your non-exempt staff. So this is staff that is paid by the hour that they work. Before we talk about these comparisons, I want to point out that this chart does have one additional column. When we look at non-exempt staff, it's important not just to look at pay and the midpoints, but we also want to look at how your minimums compare to the market. Because when we're recruiting for non-exempt staff, those are often the rates that you advertise, and it's important to make sure those are competitive. I'll also share that we are seeing pretty large increases across the state to minimum pay for some of the lowest paid jobs in school districts. There are labor market shortages, and we're seeing those shifts come. So for clerical and technical, so this is all of your secretaries, your administrative assistants, technicians, accounting and purchasing specialists, those types of jobs. Manual trades would be the custodians, cafeteria staff, bus drivers, licensed trades, those jobs. And then instructional support, of course, includes instructional aides, special education aides, LVNs, and nursing assistants. So the big picture with this group is your staff is paid very competitively. Your non-exempt staff is paid well above market in each of these groups. But then when we look at the structures, you'll see the structures are a little bit lower, and your minimums, which again, we're seeing rises there. Your minimums for the manual trades group are about 5% below. And then finally, we'll review the market analysis for your extra duty stipends. Now for stipends, because these are relatively small dollar amounts, we look at them in terms of the dollar amount difference rather than percentages like we do with pay. So the stipend study reviewed how competitive your individual stipends are, but we didn't review the number of each stipends that you pay. So when we looked at overall comparisons of your athletic stipends, all of them are above market with the exception of football, and that one fell a little bit below market by $483 on average. So some of your football stipends were above market and some were below, but on average, that group is a little bit below. And then for performing arts and fine arts stipends, so these are the group of stipends that are the lowest to market. Overall, they're $1,472 below market on average. Academics, these are really pretty close. So these are stipends like your UIL coaches, your campus coordinators for UIL, and it also, the next row, I've got your department chairs and your grade level leaders. And so I have made a recommendation to simplify these by paying a single market competitive rate per level for those. And so I'll dive into the recommendations. So recommendation 1 is we're recommending that you adopt the proposed pay structures that we've provided for you. One thing that these structures do is they simplify your pay practices. Right now you've got multiple control points in single pay grades, and that just makes things harder on your HR department. So we've simplified them. We've made sure that you have strong starting salaries, that your midpoints are aligned above the market rate, and that your jobs are grouped together based on their market value, their skill, effort, and responsibility. Recommendation 2 is to adopt a general pay increase model. And I've provided 3 different models at the request of your district, so you have some options. So Model 1 is a 1% general pay increase. Under Model 1, every teacher would receive a $575 increase. Model 2 is a 2%, and that includes a $1,150 increase for all of your teachers. Model 3 is a 3%. It includes a $1,700 increase for all of your teachers. Now, under each model, the teacher raises are calculated based off the market median teacher salary. And for non-teachers, they would receive a pay increase based off their pay grade midpoint. So I'm going to show you, I'll just scroll through these kind of quickly, but I want to show you what your teacher structure looks like under each of the models. So with Model 1, that's the 1%. We saw this graph before, but the dotted green line is the 1% teacher increase. So you can see in some areas it really doesn't move your structure at all. And I do want to point out that that blue market line, of course, it's a moving target. So we're comparing what we're recommending for next year for teacher salaries against this year's market. We don't have a very clear picture of what all of your peer districts are going to do. But we do know that market line is going to move, and our initial survey results are saying the average teacher increase statewide is about 3%. So you can see with Model 2, that green line shifts up a little bit more. And then, of course, with Model 3, you go up even further. I will say you're in a very good position with districts, clamoring to see what raises they can give for their teaching staff this year. You're already above market, so you're in a great position. And then recommendation 3 is to provide additional salary adjustments to address market differences and maintain equity. So a few things about these. So the first one, bring to minimum. Anytime we recommend to adjust your structures up, which we've recommended $14 minimums and $15 minimums for your instructional aides, anytime we move those up, we want to make sure that we're paying all of your current employees within that new pay grade. So we don't want anybody left below. And so what we do is after the general pay increase, we then apply, if anyone is still below, we're going to bring them up to 1% above the minimum. That way when you hire someone new next year, they won't be making more than someone that already works for you. And then I'll talk about the placement scale adjustments next, because they kind of go hand in hand with that adjustment to the minimum. So again, when we raise structures, we want to raise pay up, But we don't want to stop there because we don't want to leave all of your current staff compressed in the bottom of the pay range. We want to spread them based on experience through, towards that midpoint rate. And so the placement scale adjustments were applied to your non-exempt pay groups to make sure that we're honoring the experience. And basically what it does is it ensures that new people that come in aren't going to be making more. We don't want any employees to say, I have to leave and come back to make more money. We're going to take care of that with the placement scale adjustments. And then teacher pay equity adjustments are also important. What we're doing here is ensuring that those that are teacher certified, that are taking on leadership positions, counselors, assistant principals, we want to make sure that they're being paid more than what they would be making if they were in the classroom. So that's what those adjustments do. And then the last adjustment is the strategic adjustments. This is just a nice way to spend a little bit of money and target those that are lowest to the market by giving them an additional 1% of their midpoint. So anybody after all the other increases and adjustments, if they're still below 90% of their midpoint, then we just add on another 1%. And then recommendation 4 is to consider increasing your stipends. We just want to align those with the market rates. I've also made a recommendation to simplify your department head and grade level chair stipends, and also consider consolidating your bilingual students to fewer classrooms and paying one single market competitive bilingual stipend. And recommendation 5 is one that can be challenging. So you do have employees who are paid above the new pay structures. And so when that happens, you have choices as a board. I have itemized general pay increases in the cost model for these individuals. You could choose to give them the same general pay increase even though they're outside the structure. You could consider giving them a one-time payment to honor their contributions for the last year, or you could give them a lower general pay increase. The reason we talk about this is we've set those structures and we're limiting the variance from that market rate. And so if you've got someone that's paid over and you're continually pushing them over, you're not honoring your structures. And because your structures are set really so strongly, if someone is outside of that box, they're paid very competitively. Okay, and moving to the cost models. So these are broken down by each of the job groups that we talked about. You've got the total dollar amount for the general pay increase. I've also included what those adjustments cost. So again, for your exempt groups, those would be adjustments to minimum. They would be teacher pay equity adjustments and strategic adjustments. And then for all of the non-exempt jobs groups, which would be clerical, manual trades, and instructional aides, those would be, again, adjustments to minimum, and then also those placement scale adjustments. So on the 1% model, your total increase amount would be a little under $2.4 million. It's a 2.2% budget impact. And then the 2% model, so you'll notice that when we give more on the general pay increase, the adjustments then go down because we're needing fewer adjustments when we give more on the front end. So for the 2% model, the total cost is right around $3.3 million. It's right at a 3% budget impact. And then the 3% model is about $4.1 million, or a 3.7% budget impact. Okay, any questions I can help with?
To clarify I just circled on recommendation 3 where it says strategic adjustments. You mentioned, for example, and I just want to clarify if I'm understanding correctly, let's say a teacher got I don't know, promoted to an administrator. But they kind of stayed at the same salary or the same daily rate. So is that what it means to strategically adjust so that way they can have a higher salary?
Sort of. I think what you're talking about is the teacher pay equity adjustments. So those are ensuring that those that are in that teacher career path, the counselors, the assistant principals, although it doesn't, we apply it to principals, it doesn't usually hit them because they're making more than a teacher typically. But so the teacher equity adjustments are really what is driving teacher certified. Although, a counselor, for example, is paid on one of the administrative structures, and so they would, if their pay is low in that pay grade, then it would certainly apply to them.
Okay, so it's
Yeah.
teacher equity, okay. Teacher pay equity. Thank you very much for clarifying.
Yes, my pleasure. Any other questions? I know it's a lot of information for a short amount of time.
I think Dr. Dino will look at all that and give us more information and what he has planned for the next year, and he has. So a tough job, but I think Dr. Dino will do well.
Yes.
I think so too.
And thank you for all the information.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you
for
all.
information.
I'm a visual learner, so having the graphs and everything broken
yeah.
down that way really helps me a lot.
It is, I agree.
Thank you for y'all's time, really.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
It'll be very,
pleasure.
very, very helpful for the
Good.
direction that we're going in. So again, thank you for all your work and diligence in this.
So one question, overall, and you compared to different schools here in the valley, right?
Yep,
You said that we have a low turnover ratio, right?
you do.
And then the pay is it's up there compared to the local districts here in the valley, correct?
Correct.
So
Yes.
teachers and staff are getting paid for what they are worth.
Yes.
I believe so. Well, we never can pay them enough, right?
No, correct. I agree. I agree.
But yes, your pay is competitive as compared to your peer districts in the area, for sure.
Above the market.
Overall,
Yeah,
yes.
above the market.
When you took
Great
that
news.
moment to pause and
Yeah, I'm no idiot.
I just wanted to, whenever the teachers and staff are watching, congratulations,
That's
because
right.
they do an awesome job for the district. I feel like crying myself because
I'm sure
I was
they
part
do.
of that, and it's amazing what they do day in and day out. And Weslaco ISD, I mean, we're super proud of everybody. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you're taking care of your teachers. That's wonderful.
Now, in your professional opinion, do you feel like what you see here is favorable with the cost of living on a year-to-year basis? Because I know it changes, and from one year to the next, you've seen what's happening with gas prices, just that alone. And then when you go to grocery stores, where it is. So, are we in good shape? I mean,
Well, that is a question above my pay grade, unfortunately.
but it's important because we want to be fair.
In typical years, the pay increases that school districts in the past couple of years have been able to give have probably not been enough to keep up with inflation. It's really hard.
Yes.
It's Cheryl and I are also not getting raises that keep up with the cost of inflation. It is challenging.
I mean, I think when you look at like the news and you see what's going on all over Texas, and you know, teachers are the most critical component within a school district. They're the ones that are in the classroom. They're the ones that deliver the instruction, and
Yep.
they're the ones that create, deliver the product that the organization is tasked to do, which is academics,
Yep.
excellence. And so you see that those increases across the state in the different areas and how they're going above market value in some cases. And I think that even though we had a very difficult time with COVID and all the stress that caused and the heartache and whatnot, and now that we're moving out of that, we're seeing that people are realizing that the teacher's pay scale itself has been overlooked for quite some time. And realistically, I think that we need to continue to move higher. I know that Weslaco ISD already has a very competitive pay scale compared to most districts in the valley here. I know I saw a Monitor article that we weren't a part of, but our starting salary is probably one of the highest compared to the numbers that I saw in that article. And I know that the board and everyone's been discussing about, they have a target goal and a target rate, because when you do look at a 20-year teacher, after providing service for 20 years, and they're still below us, the $70,000 mark, yeah, for what they're delivering, I said, I still think we still have a lot of work to go.
Yeah,
And to get
the
there.
teacher pay is compressed, for sure. It's close to what a starting teacher makes and a 20-year teacher.
Right, the compression of it,
There's not a
and so-
huge, and that is nationwide. It's
Right.
how our teacher plans are set up.
Right, and then now, I think now's a great time to start working on that.
Love it.
But it was good to see where we stand with all staff, because when it comes down to it, it doesn't matter if it's me or somebody that's in maintenance or whatever, it's going to cost us the same.
Right.
So we want to be as equitable as possible within our capabilities. So this information is very, very helpful, and it's good to see where we stand. But like you say, if we could do more, we certainly would. But we do have challenges that we have to overcome to get to where we want to be. But we're going to keep working on it, and with your help, this is very useful. So thank you so much.
And you've got a great team here.
Oh,
I
yes.
mean, everyone did
They
a great
do.
job, so, I mean, just a general, congratulations and thank you for what you do, because this is about taking care of our staff, and in turn, they take care of our students, and it's a great effort, so thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 5.
Item 5?
Not 8 o'clock? Ready, Carlos? The time now is 5:38, and we go to item 5, adjournment.
So move.
Motion carries. We are adjourned.